So we're now recording, and as I said, I'll hand over to Anna, who will start off our presentation.
Okay, thanks, Rhiann. Hello, everybody. Just to give you some background on the consultation for Creaton Conservation Area, we did run a 6-week consultation earlier in the year. It began in March, which meant that it ended up running into the period where we were in a national lockdown. So we are running it again now to give people another opportunity to respond. But the comments that we received first time round earlier in the year, those will form part of the consultation, and we'll be taking those into account as well. So the District Council has a statutory duty to undertake conservation area reviews, both of its existing conservation areas, as well as exploring the possibility of new designations. So a district-wide review is currently being undertaken, and that includes Creaton. Conservation areas form some of the most architecturally and historically interesting settlements in the district, and Creaton certainly falls into that category, with its variety of historic buildings, the historic layout of the village around the green, and its rural setting. Creaton was first designated as a conservation area in 1973, and it was last reviewed in 1997. So in Creaton's case, it's over 20 years since the last review. So it's a good opportunity now to look at the current boundary, to see if it's fit for purpose, or if there are any areas that have changed during that period, which means that they no longer merit being in the conservation area. We've also looked at whether there are areas of the village that are now considered to be worth including in the conservation area, and whether the boundary should be extended. As well as reviewing the boundary, we've also produced a draft conservation area appraisal and management plan, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail a bit later on. So conservation areas are areas of special architectural or historic interest, which are designated by local planning authorities through the Planning Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. Over 10,000 conservation areas have been designated nationwide since they were first created in 1967 as part of the Civic Amenities Act. Conservation areas have been designated over many different types of area, including residential, industrial, commercial, and landscape areas, and they vary in size from just a handful of buildings to many hectares of countryside. So when we talk about the character of a conservation area, character is really created and influenced by many factors. And these can include land use, age of buildings, or the consistent use of open spaces, or the use of particular materials or styles, or the impact of purposeful design. For properties that are located within a conservation area, it does introduce some additional planning controls, and these seek to enhance or preserve the special character and appearance of the area. And we'll have a look at what those are in a minute or two. So the character of Creaton's conservation area is influenced by a number of factors. But these include the significant age of many of its buildings, which largely date to between the 17th and 19th centuries. The evidence of its historic village layout, including areas of archaeological interest as well. There's also consistent use of vernacular building materials for both dwellings and boundary treatments, such as the honey-coloured ironstone, red brick, slate roof tiles and thatch. And there's also the influence of open spaces, and in particular the green, which is an integral part of the medieval settlement layout, and it's still a focal point of the village today. And also the location of Creaton is important on this sloping ground that rises up to the top of the ridge, which means that there are extensive views of the surrounding countryside from various points around the village. So, as I mentioned earlier, conservation area status introduced some additional planning controls, and these cover the demolition of buildings, development works, including building or demolishing walls, gates or fences, cladding, alterations to roofing, side and rear extensions, outbuildings, installing radio antennae and satellite dishes. There are also controls over works to trees that are over a particular size, although for trees it's more of a notification process rather than it being a planning permission. Planning applications for works that fall within a conservation area are determined with reference to published guidance and any other material considerations, such as an adopted conservation area appraisal. So we've just got this slide up, which shows the current conservation area boundary in the pink colour, which was adopted in 1997. And this is the area marked in pink, and there's just a few labels just to sort of help you get your bearings a little bit. So we've got the green here, this is the high street along here, and then we've got Brixworth Road, and then up at the top here we've got Welford Road, and we've also labelled the church there to help you. And the buildings marked in red are listed buildings. So the current boundary includes the historic buildings and the street pattern of High Street, Violet Lane, the open space of the green, and the historic buildings that are located around the edges of the green. This next map is showing the proposed changes to the boundary as a result of the current review that we've carried out, and the extensions are shown in the blue colour. Again, the pink area is showing the current boundary of the conservation area, and in the key there's a purple colour as well to show areas that would possibly be taken out of the conservation area, but actually for Creaton we haven't identified any areas where we think the conservation area should be reduced. So just on the side there, each of the areas that we're proposing where the boundary should be extended are labelled B1 to 6, BA1 to 6. So if I start with the areas labelled BA3, 4 and 5, these are all small areas where the current boundary either goes through the middle of gardens or through the middle of buildings, which have been constructed, or the boundaries have been slightly altered since the conservation area was adopted in 1997. So to rationalise the boundary and make where it lies on the ground less ambiguous, it's suggested that these 3 small areas are included in the conservation area. BA1, which is down at the bottom of the map, is the row of sort of mainly 18th and 19th century cottages on Welford Road, which contribute to the historic character of the village through their varying form and scale and their positioning right next to the road. And they have potential to further enhance the conservation area as they're sort of on the main approach to the village. BA2 is the large area to the north of the village, and it incorporates 4 fields and a large pond on the north side of Creaton Lodge. For the contribution they make to the setting of the historic character of the conservation area. So the fields have ridge and furrow earthworks in them, and it provides visual evidence of Creaton's sort of past link to subsistence agriculture. There's also a number of hedges that are marked on the 1885 Ordnance Survey map in this area that are likely to reflect the field pattern that was laid out at the time of the parliamentary enclosure in 1782. And then in the northwest corner of this area, there's a pond, which is actually a clay extraction pit, which was used for an adjacent brickworks, and probably supplied building materials for the brick buildings in the village. So as a whole, this area contains a number of historic landscape features that contribute to the character of the conservation area, and an understanding as well of Creaton's development. And finally, BA6 is, this includes numbers 1 to 9 Home Farm Close. And they're a good example of a small scale development that uses building materials in keeping with the character of the village. And together the buildings and the wide verges in front of them really enhance the views as the conservation area is approached along Brixworth Road and the lane to Cottersbrook as well. So the full details of why these areas are proposed extensions to the conservation area are set out in the appraisal and management plan. And I'm going to hand back to Rhiann just now, who's going to talk a little bit about the appraisal and the management plan.
Thanks, Anna. So, as we've already spoken about, conservation areas are designated due to their special interest, and we've heard about the special interest specifically of Creaton. In order to help preserve that special interest, we produce conservation area appraisals and management plans. So conservation area appraisals help to express the special interest of a conservation area. And they do this by identifying what about the area is important, as well as highlighting areas which could benefit from enhancement in the future, or also potentially any threats to the character of the conservation area that might have occurred since a previous review. Conservation areas, again, as we've heard, vary entirely depending on the local heritage that is in the area, and therefore appraisals also vary quite a lot depending on the local authority producing them. So in general, they contain an explanation of the development of the area and how it has got its historic interest, for example, and that might include identifying any areas of archaeological potential. And generally, they also contain information about the architectural interest of a conservation area as well. So that's generally expressed through building types, styles, materials, and age as well. Usually that constitutes quite a big part of conservation area appraisals, and it certainly does with ours as well. But it's not the only thing that we have in our conservation area appraisals, because there are lots of factors that make up the special interest of a conservation area. So in our conservation area appraisals, we also focus on factors such as views, the contribution of open spaces, the public realm, historic modes of movement such as footpath layout, and all of these spatial elements can really make a positive contribution to the character of conservation area, and therefore it's important to identify them in conservation area appraisals. Can I have the next slide, please, Anna? Thank you. Conservation area appraisals themselves are, or can be rather, adopted by local authorities as supplementary planning documents, and that's what Daventry District Council does. And this means that when they've been adopted, they are a material consideration in the determination of planning decisions that might affect the special interest of a conservation area. So that architectural or historic interest that makes that gives the conservation area its character. And within the planning system, and in terms of making planning decisions, There is a hierarchy of documents that Daventry District Council has, and at the top we have the development plan, which is the local plan, and then any neighbourhood plans also sit alongside that. And in the decision-making process, conservation area appraisals that have been adopted as supplementary planning documents sit just below the development plan in terms of their weight in decision making. So they do have a considerable weight, but not quite as much as policies in the local plan, for example. And the main reason that they are there is, as I've said, to help guide the planning decisions, so they can be used by both decision makers and those putting in applications. They're meant to be used by a wide variety of people. Alongside the development plan, decision makers also use national policy, so the National Planning Policy Framework, and any relevant legislation or other guidance that's available as well. The next slide, please, Anna. Thank you. As part of our work with the conservation area appraisals, we have also been looking at something that's called a local list. And local lists play an essential role in building and reinforcing a sense of local character and distinctiveness within the local historic environment. And they sit within the kind of wider range of historic environment designations. And they are a non-statutory list, so it's not like a listed building, for example. But what they do is identifying buildings or sites to go onto the local list enables the significance of those buildings or sites to be better taken into account in any planning applications which may affect a building, its site or setting. So within a conservation area, because they are often identified through conservation area appraisals, there are usually a number of different types of building and site. Not all of them will contribute to the special interest of a conservation area, but some of them might have a higher special interest for whatever reason. They might be a locally significant building that's linked to the history and the development, for example. But generally these sites are not considered to be likely to be statutorily designated, so it's unlikely they would become a listed building or a scheduled monument, for example. And therefore being able to put something on a local list recognises its local value, and in doing so sometimes they're termed non-designated heritage assets. That's something that in national policies is what we call them. By being identified as such, then they can be given protection through national policy and the decision-making process in terms of planning applications. So I mentioned that we look at the local list through our conservation area appraisals. We identify local list candidates with criteria that have been agreed and created with national guidance, national best practice guidance. And we consult on local list candidates in the conservation area appraisals. And then members of the public can nominate candidates to the local list if they wish. And then any that are taken forward after the consultation period are then adopted by the council onto the Daventry local list as part of the conservation area appraisal process. Okay, next slide please, Anna. Another part of our work with conservation areas is looking at something that's called Article 4 directions. So Anna already mentioned that there are certain planning controls within conservation areas, but by no means is everything controlled under the planning system. And a lot of minor development can still occur within conservation areas without the need for planning permission. You don't need to put in a planning application to be able to undertake a lot of domestic alterations and things like certain extensions. and this is granted as permitted development through the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order. And Article 4 of that order allows local planning authorities to limit permitted development rights where it's considered necessary to protect the local amenity or the well-being of an area. They are very commonly used within conservation areas because of the statutory duty to preserve and enhance their character and appearance, and they help to bring a bit of control over the types of development that can occur. And through the conservation area appraisals, we can identify features that make a positive contribution. So, for example, historic windows or historic roofing materials, and where it's considered that those identified features make a positive contribution and therefore should be preserved as far as possible through the planning system. An Article 4 direction allows the local authority to have a bit more control in that decision-making process. It doesn't necessarily mean that development has to stop and that nothing can be changed. It just allows a little bit more of a dialogue so that features that have been identified as positive can be preserved wherever possible. Okay, can we have the next slide, please, Anna? So the consultation that we're in at the moment is lasting for 8 weeks. So it lasts until the 18th of January. And the consultation documents are available on our website. So if you go to the Daventry District Council website and type in conservation areas into the search bar, then you will be able to view our consultation documents, including the Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, and there are maps of the conservation area, proposed conservation area on there as well. You can comment online, so on that same web page there is a link to a survey that you can fill out and send to us electronically, or you can comment via email to our heritage@daventrydc.gov.uk email address, or our postal address, and we will show those at the end, and you can also find those details on our website. Hard copies of the document are available at the moment during the consultation period by post free of charge. So if you are interested in having a hard copy of the document rather than viewing it online, then you can get in touch with us again via that Heritage email, and we can get one posted out to you during the consultation period. Okay, can we have the next slide, please, Anna? Once the consultation period has closed, we take in all of the comments that we've received during that consultation period. And I must say that all consultation comments must be sent to us in writing by the deadline of 5 p.m. on January the 18th. And we can't accept late comments, unfortunately. But all of the comments that do come in during that period are compiled into a report which sets out the comments and then sets out the officer responses and any subsequent action to be taken. So, for example, alterations to the conservation area appraisal where there has been a justified change put forward. And then that report is put forward to the Daventry District Council members, and they decide whether to adopt the new boundary and the appraisal as a supplementary planning document. Once they've made a decision, all of the homes that are within the conservation area are notified of the decision by post. And once it's been adopted, then the conservation area controls come into force in the designated area. So, for example, on the images that Anna was showing, the pink area in the first example that is the current boundary, all of the planning controls apply to those homes within that designated area. Okay. So I think we're on to the last slide, That's great, thanks. And these are the consultation details. As I said, the consultation will run until 5 p.m. on the 18th of January. And all comments should be made in writing to either our heritage email, or there is our postal address there as well. As I said at the beginning, we're recording this, so this presentation will go on our website on that conservation areas webpage that you can see the link for at the bottom of that slide. And our email address is also on our website as well, so if you need that at all, or if you've got any questions after this presentation, then you're more than welcome to email us with any questions, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. I think that's everything for our presentation, so I think we've got one question to address that was sent in to us prior to the meeting this evening, and then we will we've got a bit of time left, so we'll open up after that, just in case anybody has any questions. I don't think there's been anything in the chat as far as I'm aware. No. So Anna, I will pass over to you for that question.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. In 2017, there was a planning appeal in relation to an application for 10 houses on land to the south of Courthouse Close, and the appeal was dismissed by the inspector on the grounds of the importance of the open area of land for the rural character of Creaton. So the question that we've received relates to whether views across this land, especially from the ridge up above the village, where the A5199 now runs, can be included in the conservation area appraisal as an important view. When we're considering views, we're really thinking about them in terms of their contribution to the conservation area. We look at views that are within the conservation area, that views that can be seen out of the conservation area, and also views towards the conservation area. So the land in question is not within the current boundary or the proposed boundary, so we wouldn't include it as contributing to views within the conservation area. There is a view that's highlighted in the appraisal document from the churchyard out towards the open countryside, which looks across this land. So it's highlighted in the appraisal in that way. And the third way it could be considered for inclusion is whether there are views across this land towards the conservation area from Courthouse Close, and also the public footpath that runs northeast from the end of Courthouse Close. At this point, I can't really give a definitive answer about whether those views are there and can be included in the conservation area appraisal, because it's something that really needs to be checked on the ground. But thank you for sort of bringing this to our attention, and it is something that we will go back and have a look at as part of the consultation. And then that will be reported back in the report that goes to council, and if necessary, changes will be made to the appraisal document to include it. So if we want to open up the floor to any other questions that anyone might have.
So hopefully you should be able to unmute yourself if you need to ask a question, but if people would prefer not to ask questions in this particular forum, then as I said, you can email us at the heritage@daventrydc.gov.uk if you prefer to ask questions that way. That's more than welcome. So it doesn't look like we've got any questions. So on that note, I'd just like to thank everybody for attending this evening. We appreciate your time in the evening, especially now that it's getting dark and a bit wintry. So thank you very much. And as I said, this recording will be put on our district council website as soon as possible. And if you do have any consultation responses to put forward, then please do so by 5 p.m. on the 18th of January. And I think that's everything from us. So I'd like to wish everyone a good evening, and I'll be finishing the meeting in just a moment. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.